welcome back to another exciting episode of the First Chapter series. I am your lovely host, Miss Disney. Yeah! Woo, 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 woo! Yeah, yeah, yeah! He's like, put me down. Okay. And in this episode, we are going to be reading another book of the great Disney Chills series, Once Upon a Scream, written by Vera Strange. And in this book, we are going to be learning about a 13-year-old Dawn didn't technically steal anything, but after being sent from the city to live with her aunts in the country, it sure felt like she was being punished. Her parents had decided she needed a fresh start and some new friends. Dawn is thrilled to be invited to town, darling Leah's 13th birthday, until she learns her invitation is actually just a prank. When Dawn finds a spinning wheel and accidentally pricks her finger, she makes a wish that causes half of the town to fall asleep. Will Dawn discover a way to reverse the sleeping curse? Or will the townspeople be lost in their dreams forever? Ooh. Let's see what happens in the first chapter. Chapter 1. Once Upon a Scream. No. Get off me! Once upon a scream, Dawn woke in a panic. She struggled in her bed, trying to tear off the roses pricking her skin and strangling her. Please, let me go. She sat upright and gasped for air. She glanced down, but the only thing wrapped around her body was the rosebud printed quilt. No roses were choking her with her perfume. No thorns were stabbing her flesh, and no vines were wrapped around her body, dragging her down into the dirt and threatening to bury her alive. It was all a terrible nightmare. Even so, it took Dawn a moment to fully wake up. Remnants of deep sleep kept her brain in a spell. The nightmare was so vivid that it held her in its terrifying grip. But there was more to it. Dawn rubbed her tired eyes, taking in her surroundings. Morning sunlight slanted through the white shutters, hitting the quilt on the bed in a crisscross pattern, reminding her of a jail cell. Antique furniture took up the rest of the space, including an old wooden writing desk with a hutch, a stiff velvet back chair, an old-fashioned wardrobe with mirrored doors, and a canopy bed draped with yellowing lace that might have once been white. But Dawn couldn't be sure. She blinked in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings as she fully awakened, still feeling adrenaline making her heart pound. It took her a moment to remember where she was. Then she frowned as her memories tumbled back. Dawn wasn't in the big city anymore. She was in the country, living with her two aunts. In fact, she had been in Castletown for 3 days already. Ooh, creepy. And they felt like the longest days of her life. That was why she kept having the same nightmare every night. Her parents had sent her away as a punishment. The incident surfaced in her mind, even though she usually tried to forget it. Back home, Dawn had got caught shoplifting from the corner store with her two best friends. Well, technically speaking, Dawn hadn't stolen anything. But she was there when Ronnie palmed a lipstick and Daniela stuffed the nail polish into her purse. And Dawn didn't try to stop them either, even though her heart was racing and she knew that it was wrong. They'd done a few things to break the rules before, like skipping class and sneaking off campus to get ice cream. But this was different. They were breaking real laws this time. The security guard busted them on the way out and called their parents. Even though Dawn argued that she didn't technically shoplift anything, her parents saw it differently. And the store security footage looked pretty bad, Dawn had to admit. But being there makes you an accessory to a crime, her mother said. She was a junkie for those procedural cop shows on late-night cable. Those girls are big trouble, her father added. I always knew it. I tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen to us. You said we were being overprotective and controlling. Dawn cringed inside. Yep, those had been her exact words. Dawn Rosa Flores, what am I going to do with you? Her mom added in histrionic voice. You're not even a real teenager yet and already causing big problems. Her mother only used her full name when she was really upset. That's how Dawn knew that this was a big deal and wouldn't blow over easily. But still, she figured they'd ground her for a week or two, maybe even a month, take away her phone and computer privileges, make her do some extra chores, the usual punishments they doled out whenever she broke the rules. But their solution shocked her. Dawn's parents informed her that they'd spoken to her two aunts, Flor and Mary, and they had agreed to take her into their home out in the country for the remainder of the school year. That meant 6 whole months. Dawn felt a jolt of shock, chased by fury, anger. How can you do this to me? She cried out. This is so unfair. It wasn't that she didn't like her aunts. On the contrary, they were nice enough and always found a way to make her smile, even if they were a bit on the quirky side and spoke with thick southern drawls. Aunt Flora was her father's older sister, and she married to Aunt Mary. Dawn hadn't seen them in person in a few years, since they lived so far away. They lived in Castletown, which was located in the deep south, and didn't even have an airport, making a quick weekend trip there all but impossible. But she chatted with them on FaceTime just about every week, when they were catching up with her parents. How can you send your child away? It must be illegal or something. You can't just abandon me, Dawn said, continuing her freak out. Calm down and stop exaggerating, her father said in a stern voice. We're not abandoning you. Aunts Fleur and Mary will take care of you, her mother said reassuringly. They love you too. But I can't live in the middle of freaking nowhere, Dawn continued, as the horror of her situation started to sink in. What about my friends? What about my school? Well, that's part of why we're doing it, her father replied in a measured voice. Angry tears tumbled down Dawn's cheeks. Why didn't they understand how she felt? Her parents explained that they wanted to get Dawn away from the bad elements in the city. The bad elements being her two best friends. But also, they argued the crime rates were rising in their neighborhood, and the public schools in their area also weren't that great. Her parents couldn't relocate right now due to their jobs. Her mother was an ER nurse, while her father worked construction. Besides, they explained that this was only a temporary solution to get Dawn through the rest of the school year. Dawn cried and raged and argued, then sulked before finally giving in. Not that she had a choice. She was being sent away, and that was final. Now, here she was, facing the rest of the school year in this backwards, middle-of-nowhere place called Castletown. The complete injustice of her situation dawned on her. In fact, now that she thought about it, everything about this place bugged her. Literally. For starters, it was too wild. There were so many icky insects, especially mosquitoes, that swarmed at sunset. Also nature, stuff like trees, forests, snakes, and worst of all, poison ivy and poison oak. Everything wanted to bite her, or poke her, or made her itch and sneeze, or all of the above. Dawn was allergic to this place. She missed the concrete jungle of the city, dotted with parks, where nature was tamed and pruned into submission, and the sun was too bright out in the country. Dawn was used to smog and towering buildings filtering out the daylight, casting the city in shadow. She also missed the adrenaline-fueled rush of navigating the city streets, dodging taxis and pedestrians and hopping on the crowded subway. She even missed the sirens and traffic noise, which blared all through the night. Out in the country, it was so quiet that it made it hard to fall asleep. She never knew that silence could actually keep you awake at night. Castletown didn't even have a proper shopping mall, or movie theater, or any sort of public transportation. Her aunts lived way up a long, twisty dirt road with nary a neighbor in sight, unless you counted the chickens in the coop down by the rose garden. They were friendly enough, but couldn't exactly hold a conversation. In short, Dawn hated it here. And most of all, she missed her two best friends. They were hundreds of miles away from Castletown, and even trying to text them was next to impossible. She couldn't get a cell signal at their house, and the Wi-Fi was spotty, going in and out, making Dawn feel even more isolated. Occasionally, she could catch a signal on her phone if she crawled into the corner of her room and raised her hand as high as she reached. That's how she spent her first few days in Castletown, desperately searching for a signal so she could text complain to Ronnie and Daniela, or watch the latest vids and social media posts. Her arms and shoulders would start to ache from holding the phone in such unnatural positions. But mostly the vids froze halfway through loading or worse, crashed her phone apps altogether, prompting her to throw her head back in defeat and grumble another round of, "Ugh, I hate stupid Castletown." In addition, there was the endless list of chores that her aunts thrust on her. Weeding out the rose garden, which triggered her allergies and stabbed her with their razor-sharp thorns, cleaning the chicken coop, major barf, hauling out the compost, extra major barf. Something so gross that she couldn't bear to ask what it actually was, or any other manual labor they could dream up for her. Okay, I love you, Quinn. With that morbid thought, Dawn forced herself out of bed, wincing at the chill in the air and the cold sting of the floorboards. She shivered in her thin pink nightgown. Her new bedroom always felt cold and drafty, even on a sunny day, like this day was shaping up to be. The ancient radiators didn't heat the space evenly, or at all. She quickly checked her phone, then frowned. No new messages. It was possible her friends hadn't texted her yet. It was pretty early in the morning, but a worse thought pinged her. Did they forget about me? More likely the Wi-Fi was acting up, she forced herself to believe. Dawn stood up on her tiptoes and reached her arm into the corner, trying to catch a signal. She held that uncomfortable position for another long minute, until she started to cramp badly. But still, no new messages appeared. With a deep sigh, Dawn gave up and approached the wardrobe, taking in her reflection in the warped mirror. She had long black hair from her mother and bright green eyes from her father. Her cheeks were high with a smattering of light brown freckles. Her eyes were puffy and her niche nose itchy. "Why am I allergic to Castletown?" she said with a sharp sneeze. She shot an accusing glance at the window. Outside, she glimpsed a fresh of dark red, almost like blood. It was her aunt's rose garden maze, of course. But suddenly, her horrible nightmare flashed through her head again. She remembered the roses stabbing and choking her. Not only was the rose garden probably the catalyst for her bad dream, but it was also the instigator of her daily sneezing fits. Of all things, it turned out that Dawn was terribly allergic to roses, and lucky for her, Castletown happened to be the rose capital of the South. The town's slogan was even "Stop to smell the roses," as the cheerful hand-carved sign had informed her when her aunts drove her through the tiny downtown for the first time. Every shop and store, and even the planters along the road, sported bushels of roses stretching their delicate petals toward the sun, making the town an eccentric roadside tourist attraction, vital to the local businesses. Her aunt's two-story stone cottage was situated on a large parcel of land that spanned 7 acres, all the way up to the dark forest that surrounded their quaint farm, allowing them to indulge in their great passion for gardening, which was second only to their passion for collecting and selling antiques at their shop called Spindles and Things. In fact, while the farm's chickens were the source of eggs, more importantly, their droppings made for the best fertilizer to grow roses. Her aunts had kindly informed her on her first day, not realizing how much that idea made Dawn want to puke. Dawn, after reflecting on all this, returned her gaze to the window. The rose bushes themselves were shaped into neat hedges that wound into an intricate maze, which apparently became a sort of tourist attraction in the summer season that allowed her aunts some extra money and stirred up business for their antique shop. Nothing fun or interesting ever happened in Castletown, Dawn felt. Proving her point was the fact that a bunch of dumb flowers that made her sneeze were the place's main draw. The rose maze took up the whole backyard. It was also super easy to get lost in. Dawn knew because she'd spent her first day there lost inside the maze, trying to find her way out, until her aunts took pity and fetched her for dinner. You can't trust roses, she remembered Aunt Mary telling her as they led her out of the labyrinth. She glanced at the wrought iron sign, Rose Garden Maze, enter if you dare. Oh, and why's that? Dawn asked, stifling another sneeze. Because they trick you, dearie, Aunt Mary chirped. She always managed to sound like a tiny, cheerful bluebird, and in her old-fashioned periwinkle dresses. Blue was the only color she'd wear. She looked like one, too. But her comment sounded menacing. It made Dawn shiver. Trick you? How so? Dawn asked, arching her eyebrow. She then shot a glance back at the maze. She wouldn't venture back there any time soon. You see, roses lure you in to smell them with their beauty and perfume, Aunt Fleur replied, fluttering around like a slightly larger cardinal. Unlike Aunt Mary, she always wore red dresses, only to prick you. Mary touched a thorn, then grimaced as she held up her index finger. A small drop of blood stained her pale skin. Oh no, let's get you patched up, Aunt Fleur said. Hold on, I'll mix up some healing salve. We'll have you fixed up in a jiffy. But Dawn just stared at the dark red dollop of blood on the pad of Aunt Mary's finger, while Fleur worked to gather some strong-smelling herbs from the garden to make the remedy. Dawn didn't know what a salve was, only that everything in Castletown felt different and strange. Ding! Her phone chimed mercifully, with an incoming text message pushing the memory out of her mind. The Wi-Fi signal was working again. She dove for the bedside table and swiped it up, clutching eagerly for any last tethering to her old city life. She felt relief as she saw her two best friends' names, Ronnie and Daniela, pop up on the screen. She scanned the messages in their group chat, her heart racing. Ronnie. Hey, little country mouse, how's it going in the wilderness? Daniela. Seriously, us city girls miss you. Dawn typed back to them, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Dawn. Aw, I thought you forgot about me. Dots appeared as they typed their replies. Dawn held her breath and prayed that the signal didn't pull a vanishing act again. Finally, their messages flashed onto the chat. Dawn scanned them, soaking up this last connection to her old life. Ronnie. Ugh, Not a chance. Our parents took our phones away. They are the worst. Daniela, yeah, we just got them back. Finally. Ronnie, you're our first text, BFF. We never forget you, girl. They texted a selfie of them on the subway, riding it to school. It took forever to come through. Finally, the picture loaded onto the screen. Ronnie was short and vivacious with curly dark hair, wide lips, and light brown skin, while Daniela was dark-skinned with long frosted hair and sharp eyes. They both made goofy faces. It was captioned, "Miss you." Dawn gazed at the selfie, feeling her heart ache fiercely like a bruise in her chest. Ronnie and Daniela lived in the same apartment, building across the street from Dawn's family. They'd all become fast friends as little kids, playing hopscotch with pastel chalk scratched on the city sidewalks, dodging pedestrians and dogs and skipping and hopping together, eventually graduating to the same kindergarten and now middle school. Together. If there was one word to describe their friendship, that was it. The three of them did everything together, even getting into trouble, as it turned out. But now Dawn was stuck here, alone, in the middle of nowhere, a punishment almost worse than death for a 13-year-old city girl whose friends were having fun back home without her. It's just so not fair, Dawn thought again for the millionth time. The "if only" constantly swam through her head. If only they hadn't gotten caught. If only Dawn had done a better job distracting the clerk or spotting the security guard. If only Ronnie and Daniela had moved quicker. But none of that mattered now. They did get caught, and Dawn got sent away. That couldn't be changed. With a sigh, Dawn typed back with a selfie of her own, lying on the bed with an exaggerated frown, but the signal was again too weak, and it bounced right back. Dawn. Ugh, it's so dumb here. Plus, the Wi-Fi is terrible. There's nothing to do. Everything is far away. I hate Castletown. Her friends wrote back quickly, trying their best to cheer her up. Their upbeat messages crowded her screen, making Dawn feel less alone than she had in 3 long days. Daniela. Hang in there, girl. The school year will be over in a flash. Ronnie. And we'll have a big party to celebrate when you get back. Dawn read and reread their messages, feeling her spirits lift. Her friends were the best. They hadn't forgotten about her, and as soon as Dawn got back, they'd be thick as thieves again. Well, thick as reformed thieves. Dawn was done with breaking laws and getting into trouble. She'd learned her lesson big time. Ronnie. It's so not fair they sent you away. We only got grounded for 2 weeks. Daniela. For real. It's like we've been living in the Dark Ages. Dawn. I'd take the Dark Ages over Castletown. Why had Dawn's parents overreacted this way? Ronnie was right. It wasn't fair. With a defeated sigh, Dawn pulled up her phone and texted her friends a frown tear emoji and started to write a reply when suddenly her aunt's high-pitched voices echoed through the rickety cottage and up the stairs in her bedroom. Wake up, Sleeping Beauty, Fleur chirped at her. Then Mary added to the chorus, You're going to be late for your first day of school at school.